They throw that ball around that infield just like big leaguers over here do.
That's right. One away, and here is a fellow who's a national idol, is Shigeo Nagashima. He's the third baseman, hitting at .325 at the moment, but he's a national idol, makes over $100,000 a year, I understand.
Ain't that something?
Huh?
Well, look at that shortstop handle that ball.
Nice play, again. And Nagashima, that quickly is out of there. 2 out in the top of the 6th inning. And the Central League has to get something going here pretty soon, trailing by 4-0. Binocular, and you notice that you see the old style dress and the new style, Western dress.
Yeah, how
on the
about
ladies,
that?
Huh?
That's something, isn't it?
Most of them wear the modern dress, but some of them wear the traditional kimono. And the ice cream and the hot dogs and the fish cakes are all pretty much the same as in the United States. Rice cakes, yeah, they sell a little rice. Now, here is the fellow who leads both leagues in home runs with 27. And did you see the way he tagged that ball?
Yeah, it just looked like mail art lifting that right foot up there, Jim. He hit one, too.
It sure does look like art. His name is Sadaharu Oh. He's actually a Chinese fellow. He spells his last name O-H. No, O. That's all there is to it.
That's exactly what the pitcher hollered when he threw that ball. And there's old O tagging them all as he rounds third, goes into home score. That's first run for these boys.
First run of the ball game for the Central League. They now trail 4-1 with 2 out in the top of the 6th. And the usual slaps on the back once again, just like American baseball.
Kyoko was quiet. She didn't like baseball very much. She was much more concerned with her studies. Strong academically, all that mattered to her, at the time, was high marks. To get into a good school and go from there. Any time spent outside the library was spent at a much more practical place to kill some free time, the movies. Baseball tickets were expensive and overrated, because you probably weren't even going to get a good seat anyway. That's not to say she didn't get out. She had plenty of friends and plenty of hobbies, one of which was cycling. Kyoko and a friend of hers with whom she went cycling regularly would spend an hour or two rolling down the Tamagawa River on occasion, taking in the view, observing the passers-by, and talking about life together before eventually heading back the way they came to attend to the tasks of the evening. On one particular night, however, the weather took a turn for the worse. The two girls got off their bikes and took shelter under a nearby roof to wait out the rain. They were joined a short time later by a young man who had just hustled across the bridge on his way back to the dormitories where he was staying. He looked to be about 4 years older than the girls, dashing in looks and possibly Chinese? Half Chinese? It wasn't immediately apparent. The rain had washed away a great deal of his sweat, but his exhaustion could not be masked. After all, professional baseball is a rigorous endeavor. He was, as his parents had raised him, kind and polite to the young ladies. They told him of their studies, where they were from, and what they were doing before the rain hit. He let slip his status as a ball player, on the Yomiuri Giants no less. This excited the other girl under the roof. She was a massive Giants fan after all, and meeting a player, even a rookie, is always exciting. She immediately began talking excitedly about how the season was going, all the things she thought needed to happen to make sure another Japan series would happen, and of course, how great that Nagashima kid was. Evidently, she had not recognized him, and that was, most assuredly, a good thing given how 1959 had been going for him. He started to zone out, nodding his head mindlessly as Kyoko's friend continued her thoughts. Kyoko was quiet, peaceful, warm, and calming. She only spoke when she had something to say, and when she did, he listened, intently. When the rain let up and the three parted ways, Kyoko was the one whom he thought of, and he hoped to see her again. She too thought of him a great deal in the days following, and they took him up on his offer to come to the training ground and watch him practice. The young man saw the two girls in the stands every day and lit up inside whenever he knew Kyoko was watching him. Kyoko was quiet, without judgment, without pressure. After all, Kyoko was the friendliest face Sadaharu Oh had seen all year. They saw each other regularly for the rest of the year, getting bites to eat together, watching movies together, even just spending hours talking about everything. Eventually, and perhaps inevitably, their attachment became romantic. She was his escape, his paradise, his dream. The rigors of baseball weren't so bad when she was around, and challengers fell at his feet with her by his side. That's not to say that life was a picnic. It never is when it's true love. Being an escape from all your pain is a lot of pressure to put on someone. And at the end of the day, they were still two young kids, trying to make their love last in the face of long absences, infinitesimal free time, and cameras. So many cameras. As the middle of the decade rolled around, the idea of severing their attachment to one another was tossed around, even seeming much more practical at times than trying to keep it alive. However, Sadaharu Oh was much wiser now, and if his dynamic, dramatic life had taught him one lesson, it was to never let a good thing slip away. And so, in the off-season, Sadaharu took the only possible leap forward. Kyoko Koyai became Kyoko Oh on the 6th of January 1966, in the presence of most, if not every, major news outlet in the country. A lavish celebrity-style ceremony was held, dominating this news cycle for several weeks after the event. Kyoko knew what she was signing up for, and faced life ahead with all the gusto and courage her husband showed every evening at the plate. She could not imagine doing life with anyone else all those years later. Despite the life of the rich and famous that they lived, they would go on to have a long, happy marriage together and raise 3 daughters in their humble Tokyo home. She had a very important role to play. Sadaharu Oh would not become the person he was about to become without the love and care of his wife. Tetsuharu Kawakami, speaking at their wedding, said of her role, "Please take care of your husband's health so that he can work in good shape and be free of worry. Please take care of your own health too. And last, make sure you're in good condition to welcome your husband home. This is important." Think of that what you will, but she performed her charge about as well as anyone in the business. They had their challenges, differences in nationality that made courtship difficult with their families. His vocation kept him away from home for very long stretches of time, especially after their children entered the fold. According to Sadaharu, she would jokingly refer to him as her 4th kid. During the season, he couldn't be at home for anything. When the kids were sick, when Kyoko was sick, when any of the ladies had a rough day, or even just handling the day-to-day affairs of the home. Out of necessity, baseball came first. Anonymity proved utilitarian for his family while he was in the game. And though the pain of being without the patriarch of the family was great, having him home put 5 cameras and a microscope on his and his family's every move. Towing the line was how the O family spent every day of the 60s and into the 70s. The near-constant scrutiny at all angles on the field and at home eventually grew numb and ubiquitous to Sadaharu. He was more locked in than ever. Constant, focused training and razor-sharp mental discipline had begun to pay its dividends. He was a much different baseball player as a married man than he was a teenage bachelor in 1959. Entering the 1966 season, his Giants entered play as Japan Series champions, again, after a disappointing finish for the team in Sadaharu's record-breaking 1964, they rebounded and won 91 games, only dropping 1 game to Katsuya Nomura and the Nankai Hawks, beginning one of the most dominant stretches of time throughout the world in baseball history. In the century and a half of Major League Baseball in the United States, the longest stretch of consecutive World Series championships is 5 years, held by Casey Stengel from 1949 to 1953. They won 2 more championships in a span of 9 years after interruptions in that span by their crosstown rival Giants and Dodgers in 54 and 55 and the Milwaukee Braves in 1957. Those playing along at home, that makes 7 titles in 9 years. In Japan, that number is equaled by the SoftBank Hawks, who, across the previous decade, won 7 from 2011 to 2020. Both these squads are tied for third on the world rankings for consecutive titles in the major baseball leagues. The Giants are second for their stretch of consecutive JBL titles from fall 1936 to 1943 with 8, but first was this team, these very same Giants of 1965. A team that would not lose a championship series until 1974, to make for a total of 9 titles in a row. At its head, as always, was Tetsuharu Kawakami, the first legend the Giants ever had, who had hung up his cleats as a player and taken over this elite unit of superstars at the beginning of the decade. After the early retirement of Mutoshi Fujita, the ace role of the pitching staff was vacated, and in a masterstroke of general managing, a disillusioned Masaichi Kaneda was brought in after the Yomiuri front office exploited his dissatisfaction with Yakult's board and lack of activity to bring in players to support him by offering him the chance to pitch for the best team in the nation and finally win a Japan Series title. He signed in free agency and went to work at the head of the staff. He'd pitch until 1970 after winning game number 400 on the way to what would be his 5th title in a row. His number 34 is retired by the organization. The Emperor would soon be joined by red-hot rookie Tsuneo Horiuchi, who won 16 games in his rookie season, only losing twice to begin his Hall of Fame career. Over the years, the main staff formed, with Kunio Junichi, Kazumi Takahashi, Hidetaka Watanabe, and Shinichi Yamauchi forming the core of the starters. Those 9 years also saw what is perhaps the most talented lineup of position players who have ever played together in Japan. Isao Shibata patrolled center field and led off the batting order. Shigeru Takada joined him in left field. Toshimitsu Suetsugu rounded the outfield out. Then there was the infield. Shozo Doi and Toru Kuroe defended up the middle at second and short respectively. The most decorated player in the history of the Japan Series, Masaki Mori, did the catching and a very respectable portion of the hitting. And of course, the most dangerous part of the order, the O-N cannon at the corners, with our good friend Sadaharu hitting third and playing first base, and Shigeo Nagashima playing third base and hitting fourth. This team was unstoppable, finishing first in Central League every single year and not letting the best of the Pacific League notch more than 2 games off of them in the Japan Series. Neither the Nomura Hirose-led Nankai Hawks, nor could a Hankyu Braves team that fielded 300-homer man Tokuji Nagaike, the greatest base thief Japan has ever seen and the second most successful ever, Yutaka Fukumoto, along with the only real American to ever become an anime villain, Darryl Spencer, could muster anything remotely close to a killing blow to the Giants' championship ambitions. Oh, and the Giants had captured the collective imagination of the whole country and ushered what is debatably the golden age of Japanese baseball into fruition. In the wake of the 1964 Olympics, the world's image of Japan was completely turned on its head. It went from a pile of rubble after the Second World War to a modern, thriving, technologically advanced, rising superpower, a bastion of democracy and capitalism in the communist hotbed of the East, staring down China, Russia, and North Korea as a stalwart ally of the West. The V9 coincided perfectly with the economic boom for the period as well, and its love of baseball, along with its baseball team, perfectly exemplified Japan's national pride. Oh was a star, to be sure, one that a great many of Japan's youth sought to emulate. But he was only one very effective cog in the machine that was the Yomiuri Giants, especially with his full-blooded Japanese teammate throwing to him from across the diamond. They were never friends off the field, not nearly as close as people wanted them to be, but on, they were second to none as partners. He was heads and tails above every slugger in Central League, including his teammates. Nagashima, Shibata, and Doi all separately lost batting title races to O. The Junichi Dragons, in one of the most eventful and profitable periods in their history, led by Hall of Fame left fielder Shinichi Eto and center fielder Toshio Naka, could not outpace O in contact or power. The Carp, by way of the bats like the legendary eye of Kazuhiro Yamauchi and prolific speedster infielder Takeshi Koba, even with the O shift they invented to combat Sadaharu's might, were outlasted by his staggering consistency. Nor could the Yoshio Yoshida Taira Fujita-led Hanshin Tigers. The pitchers of the day can report a little better record of success against Sadaharu. Legendary Carp ace Yoshihiro Sotakoba fared well enough, posting a 1.94 ERA in 1968 at the height of O's prime. Then, of course, there were the Tigers, with the three-headed monster of Enatsu Murayama and American hurler Gene Bach, who had their good days, and, as you heard earlier, their bad days, tackling the Giants. In any case, streak or slump for Sadaharu, no team had any answers for the Giants. And oh, their super-heroic centerpiece. All this buzz around the Korakuen super team, however, got Yomiuri's front office thinking bigger. They began to cast their eyes across the Pacific Ocean to Major League Baseball. What they saw was a league and players that were vulnerable. They had been on top for so long, their stars were getting old and retiring. They trained differently, thought differently, played differently, and they asked the question, could Japanese players at last stack up to the major leagues? Thereby realizing Masutaro Shiriki's quest to beat the Americans at their own game that began all those years ago in Jingu Stadium. Now, baseball in America was, of course, still going strong. But you'd be forgiven for thinking that it had lost some of its luster. Especially as the 60s wore on, the NFL had begun to overtake it in popularity. Names like Mickey Mantle, Stan Musial, Jackie Robinson, and Willie Mays had gotten old or retired. These were changing times. Many people viewed baseball as a relic of an old America. And this was reflected in league-wide attendance dips, something very foreign to most baseball fans of Japan in more ways than one. American squads had been making exhibition tours of Asia since 1953, with a Giants versus Giants matchup taking place after Yomiuri's title victory that year. The New York Giants went 12-1-1 against the early NPB sides that trip. The Dodgers, Cardinals, Giants, and Tigers would all make trips over and do all but wipe the floor with NPB's best sides. However, post-65, things were different now. Yomiuri's management knew what they had with V9, and were eager to test its mettle in a true contest. The year was 1971. Their opponents would be the 1970 World Series champion Baltimore Orioles. They had lost the World Series to the Pittsburgh Pirates about a week before, and concerns arose in the press that the Orioles were not truly the best baseball team in the USA, and ergo would not be a sufficient test of strength for the V9. The rumors were quickly dispelled the minute the Orioles took the field after the pomp and circumstance that accompanied their arrival. The Orioles jumped all over Yomiuri's pitching in the first game with some rockets off the bat of Boog Powell and long home runs by the two Robinsons, Frank and Brooks, with Brooks showing off his customarily magnificent glove work at third base. However, Oriole ace Jim Palmer did not look sharp. He struggled to find his range and gave up 4 runs in 6 innings of work, including 2 bombs from Kuroe and backup catcher Koji Ano. This gave Giants fans hope going into Game 2 with Horiuchi set to take the mound. Game 1 ends 8-4 in favor of Baltimore. Game 2 saw Horiuchi battle Mike Cuellar in front of another sold-out crowd. Frank Robinson and Don Buford shattered Horiuchi's confidence with ease with 2 early bombs, and Mike Cuellar did the rest, giving up only 5 hits in an 8-2 victory for the O's. Similar story in Game 3, with another great pitching performance from another 20-game winner in the Oriole rotation, Pat Dobson, and another home run from future Cebu Lion Buford, in a game that finished 10-1. Horiuchi stepped up again in Game 4, and this time pitched wonderfully, throwing 8 scoreless innings, with Sadaharu and the offense jumping on Jim Palmer in the 4th inning. However, Horiuchi lost his shutout in the 9th inning, surrendering a 3-spot to the Oriole bats and causing the game to end in a tie. While the O's traveled on and faced 2 combined all-star teams, the Giants regrouped and prepared to face them in Game 7, which was really Game 5 in this makeshift True World Series. Finishing 1-3-1 would be a little bit more respectable than finishing 0-4-1. Horiuchi went to work and tossed a gem, a 2-hit complete game. Ordinarily, that would be enough to win you a game, but the offense was no hit by Mike Cuellar. The mighty V9 had failed to win a game off of MLB's best, and Shoriki's dream had turned into a nightmare. Certain players had impressed during the series, Nagashima, Horiuchi, and of course O, but overall, the Giants were very well aware of how underwhelming their performance was. The statement made by the Japanese players who did play well against MLB teams was bolstered even more by the performance of Masanori Murakami, the first Japanese MLB player ever, who was so good in 1965 for the San Francisco Giants. MLB Commissioner Ford Frick was willing to cause an international incident to make the young hurler break his contract with the Nankai Hawks, with the resulting fallout preventing any further NPB stars making the trip across the Pacific to play professionally in the States until 1995. That did not stop the American players who played against NPB teams from being blown away by just how stellar their Japanese counterparts were, and no one turned more heads than Sadaharu Oh. In varied team results against MLB, Oh himself hit .270 with a .957 OPS, along with 25 home runs in just 100 games in the V9 era, which, it's fair to say, was his peak form. And in case you're wondering who he was hitting against, among the list of pitchers he took deep are Jerry Koosman, Tom Seaver, Jim Palmer, and Steve Carlton. There have been plenty of debates and what-if situations surrounding if he was a Cooperstown quality player, had he made the trip during his prime to be an everyday player in the major leagues. But one group who seems to have not been terribly interested in debating his ability are the Hall of Famers themselves. He sure hit me. He was a superb hitter. He hit consistently, and he hit with power. If he played in the United States, he would have hit 20 to 25 home runs a year, and what's more, he'd hit 300. He'd be a lifetime 300 hitter. He had tremendous discipline at the plate. He knew the strike zone extremely well. He could pull your hard stuff, and you couldn't fool him with off-speed. Tom Seaver. There's no question in my mind he wouldn't have hit 800 home runs if he played here. But if he played in a park tailored to his swing, he'd have hit his 35 homers a year. He'd hit 300, I'll tell you that. Pete Rose. He could have played right here in the big leagues with the best players in the world. He would have hit here, not as many home runs, but he would have hit his share and hit for average. He was just an outstanding hitter. Brooks Robinson. I'm sure he would have hit in the 30s, and probably in the low 40s. 30 home runs a year adds up to about 600 home runs total. And he'd do that if he played the same number of years here that he played there. Frank Robinson. He would have hit for average and power here. In a park tailored to his swing, there's no telling how many he would have hit. He was always ready for anything we threw him. We were all impressed. Don Drysdale. O would have hit 700 home runs over here. He would be a good hitter anywhere in the world. Quality is still quality. Very kind words there from Davey Johnson, World Series winning manager and all-star second baseman at the time. We'll hear more from him later, as he's got a part to play in this story. Sadaharu does have a presence in Cooperstown currently, with several artifacts from his playing days displayed on loan from the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame, which I had the fortune to view earlier this year. But he, along with Nagashima, and several legends of the Japanese game, have been long considered in the hypothetical context of their what-if MLB careers. How does Nagashima compare with Eddie Matthews and Brooks Robinson? Who wins in a foot race between Lou Brock and Yutaka Fukumoto? Williams versus Kawakami? Kaneda versus Carlton? It goes on and on and on. As for O, his battle with MLB would happen during his lifetime. A chase not seen in baseball since Babe Ruth's single-season home run mark fell in 1961. The Bambino's career mark was now in jeopardy. For in the death knell of the V9 dynasty, O and his exploits entered the radar of one of Davey Johnson's teammates on the 1973 Atlanta Braves. A power hitter very similar to Sadaharu. The Brave center fielder was someone whose slugging ability was matched only by his sky-high average, ice-water veins, and endless work ethic to maintain his elite level of play. He and Sadaharu both had come from humble beginnings to climb the ranks of professional baseball. And in an alarming similarity, both men were negatively compared with their teammates of a different race for most of their careers. He threatened Ruth's number in 1973, but came up just shy, finishing the year on 713, one shy of tying the record. Sadaharu had a great year, hitting 53 bombs, and would enter 1974 on 585 career home runs. The Giants would enter 1974 heavy favorites to make their 9-year streak an even decade, with most of the country rooting for them to do just that. Sadaharu was the most unstoppable hitter in the league, right down to having a shift named after him. He was about to become more than just the best slugger in Japan, though. He was about to be the center of attention for every baseball fan in Asia. He would hardly be able to breathe without the press knowing about it, trying to contend with what would be the most unconventional season for both he and the Giants. And it all began on April 8th, when Hank Aaron hit home run number 715. Thank you for watching part 4 of our ongoing documentary series, The Tale of the King, all about Sadaharu Oh, here on the Global Baseball Network. Please do like and share this video if you enjoyed it, and you know somebody who would enjoy it right along with you. And be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon down below the video screen to be notified every time we upload a new video to get you your fix of the world's greatest game. I've been Marshall Emmert. Again, this has been part 4 of The Tale of the King. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one, but for now, that's the game.